What's up, everybody? Wanted to give you the getting started tutorial of how to use AgentCMD. So what is AgentCMD? It is basically just an orchestrator that runs Claude Code and Codex in programmatic mode, so you can tie things together and you don't have to run all the slash commands yourself in the terminal and wait for things to finish. So this is more or less what it looks like when you create an account on your local machine and get projects imported. It's going to import previous sessions, and if you add an Anthropic API key, it's going to also try to name them just to make it a little easier to find. It's also going to import projects automatically from any Claude sessions that you had. You can go through and clean things up. You can archive projects, star things that need to be starred. Let's click into the example to do app. This is what it's going to look like when you first get started. So if you notice here, it says install AgentCMD workflows. What is that? That's the SDK that every project that uses AgentCMD will need. And the reason for this is because we want your project to be able to leverage your slash commands, your code, your helpers, and it will create definitions inside of the project. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's install AgentCMD. We have pnpm. We'll give it a second. And this will actually, inside of your folder, add the dependency and then add the initialization script. So what does this do? This package will add it to your package.json file. So you'll see AgentCMD workflows here. It will create this .agent folder. This is where we store the workflows, the specs. It's also kind of a pattern where you can store docs as well, because there's not a great place for docs that are relevant to the agent, so you can stick them there if you want. There's nothing built in that supports that. But the most important thing is it creates this workflow definitions folder. Also, executions will be here when you actually run the workflows. When you open up the definitions folder, we've copied in a number of default workflows that come with the install. You can delete these, change these, do whatever you want with them. They're yours to use. This does build kind of a best practice of a recursive implement and then review process using the built-in slash commands that have been installed as well. So you can review this and look through. It should read relatively straightforward. This is executing, it's moving the spec at the end of the file. I kind of jumped over all of the implementation details, but we won't go into details of this definition. There's a lot of documentation around it. Feel free to dig in. But the install command, what it does is it installs this .agent folder, the workflows, and it also installs some Claude Code CMD specific commands. So these are all specific to AgentCMD and are leveraged within slash commands and elsewhere. But now that the SDK is installed, what do we do next? So the entire system is built on spec-driven development. The thought and the goal is that you either generate a spec in planning mode in your terminal and then generate a spec using the generate slash command, which I'll show you in a second, or you can do it here in the interface. This conversation is we're implementing offline mode for this example to do app. You go back and forth. This is, to me, where you spend most of your time. I spend hours sometimes making these specs, going back and forth, making sure it's right, telling it to modify certain files, not modify certain files. An effective planning session is the entire success of this product. And the more robust your planning sessions are and the ultimate spec that it generates, the more effective this tool is going to be. So we kind of went through here and asked a bunch of questions. And at the end of it, we used this command to generate a feature spec. So this is very important. You can also, I did it right from this dropdown from the slash command. So I typed in generate. We have generate feature spec, issue spec, bug spec. These are all, you can customize all of these however you want, and the end result is going to create a template that will be implementable by AgentCMD. You can also create your own. So anything following this pattern in the CMD folder, generate XXX-spec, will show up in here. It'll show up in other places in the app. It's built so that you can make as many different types of generation of artifacts as you need. You might have generate a ETE spec or generate something more security focused. So this gives you the flexibility. It comes with these three that we think features are big projects, issues are smaller, bugs are bugs. So that just gives you the idea. So once you execute this command, what happens? It's going to go through, and you can open up the slash command as well to see what it says, which is pretty much right here. It's going to go through the context and the scope of the planning session we just had and generate ultimately a spec file for you. So here is the output of the spec file. It's JSON because the system heavily leverages JSON inputs and outputs, but it'll kind of tell you what was generated. So where is this spec and how does it appear? Once you generate the spec, you can go to the specs folder and you'll see it appear here. You can open up the spec. You can see how it was generated. You can edit it right in line if you want to make changes. It's just simply Markdown. But one of the nice benefits of using the spec system built into AgentCMD is that you get things like complexity, you get phases, you get tasks, and this can potentially be leveraged to determine which agents you execute in your workflows or how many agents you execute, if it's a large task versus a small task. But it's metadata for you either way. So this is the spec here. And that's basically the workflow. Like once you want to implement it, you press this button here and we'll go there in a second. But more or less, it follows spec-driven development. So you're going to use, you're going to generate a spec in your terminal or here using the generate spec / commands. Then the specs appear here and then you go ahead and hit implement. So when you hit implement, what it does is it will populate this, it's select a file, it'll populate the spec here. These are all potential specs that can be executed across your projects. Or actually, this is just within the example to do at project. You also see here at the top, what workflow do you want to pick? So depending on the spec, maybe it's a bug heavy workflow. Maybe it's a feature front end heavy workflow that you want to make sure the definition you built has a lot of end-to-end validation built into it, a lot of user stories, etc. So that's basically it. Once you hit create, and we'll go ahead and kick this off. Well, I guess you can pick your workspace as well. And that's a pretty important thing. So probably most of the time you're going to be using work trees for total isolation. So you can spin up 1, 2, 3, 4 different things, even implement the same thing multiple times if you see it kind of going off the rails. And so we'll pick work tree here. You can determine the branch name and then you hit create. And what happens? So it goes through a setup phase. It will grab the spec from the folder structure that you just created. It will start implementing it. So you can click this view session and you can see here and follow along with the agent as it's actually starting to implement. You don't need to stay on this page. You can leave it. You can come back. It'll pick up where it left off. This is executing one of the workflow definitions. So if you look here, these are the different steps and it's all spelled out right here. This is all customizable by you. So make these definitions your own and then you can see the workflows execute. And one of the most important pieces of this is you won't see this here, but as this implements, if it finishes and it doesn't finish the specs because the specs are all outlined in Markdown with phases and then check marks for each step, it will say, oh, maybe it ran out of context. So it'll implement it again and it'll return success false until it implements the entire spec. There's then a review step that will review the work and say, oh, you missed this or this wasn't adhering to our standards. You can add as many review steps and as many processes as you want. Implement, then review. We probably will have a security step. We might have a step dedicated just to looking at duplicate functions and best practices and saying, hey, you created this function in this format, but it needs to be that format. We probably have an end-to-end step that will execute Playwright, either hard-coded tasks that are defined and generated by AI or using some Playwright MCP servers. So you can kind of see here that because it's running on its own, you can potentially string together many commands without having to worry about timing. It might take 1, 2, 3 hours to execute this workflow, but you can execute multiple workflows in tandem. And it just allows you to make it a lot more complex. I don't know about you all, but when I'm calling / commands myself, I skip steps. I skip generating a great PR commit because I don't want to wait for it. I skip security reviews. Sometimes I skip a lot of things just in the name of not having to type in so many / commands. So I built this so that you can avoid that. You build it into your workflows and then it just happens and you don't have to worry about it. And then when it's finished, you can come back, maybe kick off a workflow before you go into a meeting. You come back, the thing's implemented. Usually what happens is after I complete a workflow, I'll check out the branch and you can do that within here. You can just press this button, it'll automatically commit and go to that branch. You can check it out locally. This will push a pull request at the very end. But what I usually do is implement something. And for something as complex as like a Docker preview environment that I built into this tool, I spent about 2 hours implementing and reviewing and about 25, I think, implementation steps after I built the spec. And then I spent less than a half hour tuning it, adjusting some front-end interface interactions, and then it just worked. It was pretty beautiful. And these are the kind of things that I think you can execute with this. Thank you for your time. Just wanted to do kind of a quick overview. I know there's a lot here that we haven't covered, but if you take away one thing from this video, it's generate a spec using the generate spec commands, which will put the specs into the AgentCMD spec system. And then you go to the spec and you implement it. and implementing it will kick off a workflow here. And you want to go into the workflows that from your project and make changes to it. Generally speaking, you're planning, generating specs, implementing, planning, generating specs, implementing. That's the workflow that you should expect to be leveraging here.